In this video, I'm going to demystify React useEffect hook from the project perspective, and it's going to help you crack the questions related to useEffect hook in an interview. So let's jump into the video. Hey everyone, this is Sandeep and you're watching 100 Days of Coding React and Redux. Today, I'm going to talk about useEffect hook. So the useEffect hook is a built-in React hook that allows you to perform side effects in your functional component. Now, what's the meaning of side effect, right? So side effects are generally of three different categories. The first one is fetching data from an API, right? You want some data, right? You want to grab some data from the database and you want to render that into your React application. That could be one of the side effect in React, which we can use for the useEffect hook. Second is updating the DOM. Sometimes you need to bring the focus on your text input, or maybe you want to change the title of your document, and maybe adding event listener, removing event listener. These are kind of that is the third thing, updating the DOM. And setting up event listener is a third side effect where sometimes you need to add a listener on the document, or you need to create some kind of graphic animation. That kind of thing, you need to set up the event listeners. And I'm going to show you all the three examples one by one. So let's jump into the first example where we're going to fetch the data from the API using something called Axios. The first example of side effect using useEffect hook, that is called fetching the data from the API. So for that purpose, I'm going to use this JSON placeholder. So I'll just search for the JSON placeholder. And this is, kind of an online third-party API where, we can look for the data, which data I want, right? So say, suppose I want to load some of the to-dos, I can use this to-dos kind of thing, right? I need post, probably I can use this post API. So I'm going to use this post API. We're going to use Axios for loading this data. So Axios, if you don't know what is Axios, probably let's talk about it a little bit. So in JavaScript, we can use fetch. Fetch is built into the JavaScript to connect with the API to grab the data, okay, from the server side. Axios is a wrapper around that fetch, I would say, which helps and which basically make things easier for us to grab the data from the API. So probably I'll show you the example. So if you see this example here, so say suppose I want to load some data, I can use something like this, the syntax like this, and I can load the data from the API using from the backend using the API basically. So pretty easy. I mean, if you need any help, it's a good idea to go and search for that particular thing online and just quickly learn about it. I'll show you the example, simple example. So for that, I have my project created actually useEffect 09, and I have my index.html here. This is running also in the browser, right? Now I'm going to write one component here, and let's name that component called posts.js. I'm going to import some of the things I need, right? Like I need React. I'm also going to use state. So I'll import use state also, and the hook which we are going to use is useEffect to have the side effect. I need to install the package called Axios. So let's do that too. So I need to move into my folder first. Let's install Axios. Okay, it has installed. I can close this terminal. It's not going down actually. Okay, maybe just grab it down. Okay, so useEffect, I'm going to import Axios also from Axios. Right, I need to look at the syntax of Axios if I'm importing in the right way. Okay, now let's create a component. So I'm going to create a functional component called function posts, and here I'm just going to return some JSX for now. Like, let's say I'll put some heading posts, or maybe I'll say my posts, and then I'm going to grab some post and I'm going to render the post just below this heading. So something is changing here, right? So we are loading some data from the backend and we are showing that data here in the JSX, right? So if some things change, the things which are going to change in your application or a component, what we call it, right? In the last video, I have covered it. It is called a state, right? So this is a good opportunity to create a state. So I'm going to create a state called data. I'll call it data. And to change that state, I have a function called set data. Now, initially it's going to be an empty array. Let's go with that. And data, set data, right. And probably I'll write the rendering syntax later on. Now, I want to load the data that post data from the backend. Now I can do that. I can just write something like this, Axios. I'll write maybe I'll copy and paste actually. That could be, easy. So maybe I'll just grab this from here just to save time. So you can use Axios, then the URL to load something, right? So this is going to return me. So let's write a function actually here. Const fetch data. And this should be an async function. This is JavaScript. So when we use async await syntax, we have to make the function as async. So await, then this URL. So it's going to return me the data. I'll store it inside, say, suppose, what's the variable name I can use? I can use results. Okay. So fetch data is a asynchronous function. Why it is saying like that? Comma is expected, but where the comma is expected? Anyways, so I'm going to call this fetch data like this. Okay, const. Okay, I did a mistake actually. This is const and the syntax is wrong. Fetch data is equals to this will be my asynchronous function, right? Async function. Or maybe I can write in that format, async. Okay. Fetch data async function const result, and I can log the result also. Const, sorry, not const, console.log. I'll show you the results, which is coming back. Results. Now I'm calling this function, right? Fetch data, which is calling, which is sending the request to this API, and I'm logging my results. So now I need to export my component actually. Export default, posts, and I'm going to import it here. Posts from, somehow it's not giving me the hints. Okay, posts. So I'm going to render this component here. Okay, now if I save, go back and look into my application, and if everything goes well, I should be able to see the console log, which is I'm getting the list of all the posts. If you see here, data, right? Inside the data, I'm getting all of different posts. Now I need to move it on the right hand side. Okay, cool. So we have the data, we have the results, right? Now next, I'm going to set it into my state so that once the state is going to change, I should be able to render it here. So I'm going to use the function called set data function, right? Which is actually there to set my state. And I'm going to say results dot data, right? And that will bring me the state which I'm going to use here. So I'll use h2 to render my post title, which is, I need to put a condition also because initially the data will be empty, right? So I'm going to check if data.length is greater than 0, then only I want to grab my first post, right? And its title. Now I'm going to save, and if everything goes well, you should be able to see, I'm going to refresh, you should be able to see the first post. right? So quick recap, right? So you can use useEffect API, right? But I didn't use the useEffect API actually. I'm rendering the data here. But when you do such kind of operations, right? When you fetch the data or like this fetching of data, right? You shouldn't put it directly here. I am able to see the output, but still you shouldn't do like this. You should put this code into something called a hook or a side effect hook called useEffect. So I'm going to grab this because you know what is going to happen if I keep it like this whenever my component is going to re-render. So say suppose I'll do one thing. I'll show you the example. Okay, maybe like I'll put a button here. All right, say click me, and on click of this, I'm going to call off. Something is wrong with my editor. Here inside this, I'm just going to change some state variable. I'll create another state variable here, say count, right? Count and set count. I want to show you the things, important thing, which is like why you should write use effect. That is really important. That's why, video will get longer, but you should understand what I'm trying to show you. So 0. So now here inside this, I'm going to say set count will be count plus 1. So now every time whenever I'm going to change the state, this is going to call the fetch data, right? I'll show you that. So now see that we are getting probably error also. Now we are getting the title which is shown. Now I'm clicking on click me, and you will see that I'll show you the network panel. So the first time, like we have loaded the post, I'll minimize a little bit. See, we have sent a call and we have loaded the post. And you see that it's calling every time. It's calling the post. Probably no, it's not calling the post actually. It's showing. I think it is showing that it's calling the post every time. Maybe I'll click on the button. See that it's it's calling the post API every time. I'll show you the log probably. Let's try that. I'm just going to put a console.log here just to see like what is happening here, where we are going to print the data. And now I'm going to refresh. See, every time it is calling and it is rendering. Even I don't need to create a separate state also. That thing we need to avoid. So I'm quickly going to remove this button. I don't need it. And I'm going to remove this state also. So hence, we need to move this fetch call into something called a use effect hook. So use effect is a hook which takes a callback function as the first argument. And the second argument is really important. So when you pass the empty array here, and I'm going to move this from here to here. By doing this small change, you'll see the difference. Now, see that? It's calling that thing only once. So we are getting the log actually. So I'm going to remove this. And you see the result here, right? It's sending the post call only once, and you don't see the console log also. And there's nothing which is happening here, in the something like infinite loop was going on. That is not happening right now. So whenever like you want to load some data, right, and from the API and want to render it, you can use effect hook and call the fetch data function. And this array is nothing but this is going to execute this function only once when your component is going to render for the first time. Now, say suppose you want to render it on some more changes, right? So I think I have put that button code, right? I'll quickly show you again. So button, click me, right? And I'll say on click, I'll put a function here. And inside that function, we are going to call some set state, which I'm going to write here. Say const count, set count, use state. And I'm going to keep 0. Now, whenever, like say, suppose I want the fetch data to be called again and again whenever I'm changing the count, I can do that. So I'm going to set count here inside this, set count. I'm calling that function count plus 1. Now I'll show you, like, let's put a console.log here. And we'll see the results. Okay, so I'm calling the fetch data first time when it is going to get rendered, but I'm going to call whenever I'm changing the count also. That's why this array is there, right? So first time and whenever the count is getting changed. So now if I come back and refresh, see that we are getting the data first time. Now I'm going to clear, and if I click, see that we are getting data again. When I click again, we are getting the data again. So you can use the empty array if you want to call that function only when the first time the component is getting rendered, and you can pass the props or the state value here in this array to load the data whenever that particular state value is getting changed. Okay, so I'm going to keep this just for your reference. Now let's have a quick pause, come back, and then we will move on to the second use case that is related to our, and that should be quick one, updating the DOM. Okay, quick pause, come back, and we'll talk about this. Welcome back. Now let's see the next scenario of useEffect, where how you can update the DOM using the useEffect hook. So I'm going to copy this code just to save time, maybe the third example where I'm going to write the code. So here inside this, I'm going to create a new component called dom.js, and I'm going to paste it. So again, if you see here, right, I need to just do a little bit of formatting. Okay. And lovely. This I need to move here. Okay. So I've created a component, a functional component called DOM. I'm using useEffect hook here, which is going to get called only once when this component is going to render for the first time. And I'm changing the title. So let's give it a title of maybe like code with Sandeep. Okay. So here, basically I'm accessing the document. So you can use, you can add event listener, you can access the DOM elements, you can do any kind of changes also, which you shouldn't do that. Basically, that's what React says, whenever you want to change the DOM, you can use the state. But for such kind of thing where you need to change the title, right, you can use useEffect hook. So now I'm going to import this component. So instead of this post, we are going to import DOM from DOM. And let me render the DOM here. And when I'm going to go back to my application, you should be able to see the title is changed, right? It is now code with Sandeep. Okay, so this is example of updating DOM using useEffect. Now let's look at the third example step by step, that is related to setting up the event listener. For that, I'm going to create a new component called graphics. Okay, so I'll go and create a new component called graphics. This is for the event listeners. So I'll just grab the code, just to save time. Maybe I'll write it. At least I'll copy the top line, okay? And some part of it, and I'm going to explain it to you. It's function graphics, and straight away I'm going to export the component. Okay, it's going to return. So I'm going to copy the JSX from here. So let's copy this. So this is a div, and I'll explain what is the meaning of this div, why we are writing what we are writing here. So this div will go here. So I'm going to remove something like this top and left. Maybe I'm going to copy that later on. So now what I'm trying to do here, so I just need to write return, and inside that return, I'll have my JSX. Okay, so now let's import this. So function graphics. So again, giving an error. What is the error? Expected. Function graphics. What is wrong with this? What is expected here? Okay, I need to put the brackets. Okay. So let's save, and now I'll go back, and first of all, I need to import it here. So I'll import graphics from graphics. Now if I save, what this graphic is doing basically, it's rendering a div with the width and height of 100 and 100 pixel and a background color of, maybe I'll go with the green. Will look good, and the position is absolute. So now if I go back to my application, see that we are seeing this green square here. That's what I have rendered. Now I'm going to use something called a state. I'm going to create a state for the X and Y position, and I want my with my mouse move. When I'm moving my mouse, this graphic should follow my mouse. That's what we want to do, right? And for that, we need to use an event listener called mouse move, right? So I'm going to grab that code. So whenever you want to add the event listeners, right, we use a use effect hook. So first of all, let's create this state. So I'm going to grab the state from here just to save time, because this video is getting longer. I know I wanted to break it down, but better to cover one topic in one video. So position, set position, use states. I'm creating two different, one object with a state of properties of X and Y. Okay. So this is a state. Now I want this state to change when I'm going to move my mouse. So I'm going to add an event listener. I'm going to grab all of this code basically, and I'll explain it to you. This entire code is okay. Paste. Now I'm using use effect hook, right? And let me clear this. I'll explain it later on. So when my component is going to get rendered, right? What I'm trying to do, I'm using the use effect hook, and with this array, right? So this is going to get executed when my component is going to render for the first time, right? So what it is going to do, it is going to add an event listener of mouse move. So whenever my mouse is going to move, I'm calling this function called handle mouse move, where I'm grabbing the event and the position of my mouse, and I'm changing my position state. And what it is going to do, right? It is going to change this. So I'm going to put something called top here, and I'll grab it actually simply away just to save time. So top and left, I'm going to change. So I'm changing the style here, right? So I'm changing the top and left. So I'm grabbing my state value position.y and position.x. So this is going to set this top and left of this particular div. Now, if I go back, my application, see that? Whenever I'm moving the mouse, right, on that mouse move inside that use effect, I'm setting the top and left value. Because of that, this square is following my mouse, right? Now, say suppose this square is going to get removed from the memory. So when my application is going to, probably there is a way, right? I mean, when I'm switching to some other route, or maybe I'm changing the page, right? At that time, this add event listener should get removed. That is pretty important. Otherwise, what will happen, this will cause a memory leak. Now, there is a cleanup function in useEffect which you should always write. So that's called this return function, which you should always write inside your useEffect whenever you're using the event listener. So what this function does basically, so whenever this component is going to get removed from the DOM, it's going to call this function where it's going to remove this handler, just to avoid the memory leak issues in your React application. Okay, it's not going to do any, it's not going to show give you any difference in your application. It will work how it is working right now. Your mouse is moving and the square is also moving with it. But whenever this square is going to get removed, that graphics is going to get removed from the DOM, it's going to clear up the event listener. So that is a cleanup function which I wanted to talk about. So this is the cleanup function which we have written, which is pretty important. Okay. I think this is a long video. I understand that, but I covered a lot. So we have seen like why we use useEffect, right? So useEffect is a built-in React hook, right, that allow you to perform side effect in your functional component, fetching data from API, updating the DOM, and setting up the event list. And I've shown you all the examples, right? We have created three different components. One is a post where we have grabbed the data from the backend using this API. We have rendered it, and we have used the updating the DOM where we have changed the title. And the last one where I have shown you how to add a event listener. We have created a beautiful this square movement animation kind of thing. Cool. I hope this is helpful. You understood the use effect hook now, and you can easily answer the questions related to use effect. You can use it in your project pretty easily. All right. I'm going to see you in the next video. Until then, you take care. Goodbye. And thanks for watching the video.